Keir Starmer and his party, the flip-floppers. Only they flip-flop on the wrong things. What utter hypocrites they've all turned out to be. Here's Sir Keir Starmer telling us how dead set against the House of Lords he is.
Rebuild trust by reforming the centre of government, cleaning up sleaze, nourishing the relationship between central government and the devolved authorities, and replacing the unelected House of Lords with a new, smaller, democratically elected second chamber.
Yet he's quite happy to dish out peerages to Sue Gray. Remember her, the supposed neutral civil servant in charge of the Partygate investigation? Only she was in talks with Sir Keir Starmer. The date of which these talks started is unclear. Then mysteriously she becomes his wing woman, being paid more than him until she's unceremoniously relieved of her duties for a made-up role that she never participates in. And now suddenly she gets a peerage. It's laughable. Nothing to see here. I thought he was dead set against the House of Lords. But hey-ho, he's prone to flip-flopping. They're all guilty. Here they are in support of the waspy women.
You said we'll right that injustice, and within the 5 years of the Labour government we will compensate them for the money that they've lost. This is their money that they've had stolen off them, and it's completely unacceptable.
I think it's completely unfair, and I want to keep fighting for a fair deal for the waspy women.
A real injustice, and we need to do something about it, Carol, because that wasn't the base upon which you paid in. That wasn't the basis upon which you were working. We've got a government that has basically put its fingers in its ears.
So how come suddenly you don't want to be part or take part or even part with another 10 billion? After all, you've been chucking it down a supposed black hole with ludicrous carbon capture that has failed and cost a fortune everywhere it's ever been tried. Money for climate nonsense and dishing out cash to farmers in other countries, whilst our farmers here are dropped an inheritance tax time bombshell, despite being promised support when Labour were in opposition. Can a party be held to account for what could be seen as deceiving people? Because that's how I feel about it. Worse still, rather than accepting their policies are a disaster thus far and that they have had a start that even their ardent supporters would argue has to be one of the worst in history for any government, Sir Keir Starmer wouldn't change a thing.
But is there anything that you would do differently if you were starting out now, knowing what you know?
No, we had to do tough stuff. We're getting on with it, and I'm very pleased to be delivering from a position of power rather than going around the division lobbies losing every night. I've had too much of that.
Unbelievable. No contrition, no empathy or remorse whatsoever. They're pressing ahead regardless. That's what we're dealing with, folks, and there's another 5 years of it. Merry Christmas. So joining me now, former editor of the Labour list, Peter Edwards. Peter, sometimes you want the Labour Party to flip-flop on something that is clearly unworkable. They don't. But then they kind of appear to be big hypocrites on other things. So the waspy women, for example.
I wasn't sure if your critique was that Labour didn't have a mandate for particular changes, or do you think they should accomplish everything within 5 months, even though they've been elected for 5 years? But on the waspy women, it's an injustice. I think Labour in opposition accept it was an injustice. It's quite an expensive one to fix. The recommendation of the Independent Parliamentary Commission was about a £10 billion cost, but perhaps there's something in the middle, between doing nothing, which is free, and the full cost of 10 billion. But the idea that you spend your time when there's so much else going on in Britain and around the world and try and find a pragmatic solution doesn't seem unreasonable.
But then I get this, and I think my issue, and I think a lot of the issues that people are having with it, is that they said one thing when they were in opposition, and then they have completely turned around and are doing the very, very opposite.
Well, I don't accept that. So
you don't accept that?
On waspy women, Labour in opposition said there was an injustice and they tried to resolve it, and they still can resolve it. Just there was one proposal by the Parliamentary Commission for Standards that they said is currently a bit too expensive. But that doesn't mean there aren't other proposals. Similarly, on the House of Lords, which you were very frustrated about, but every government appoints peers to try and rebalance the chamber. The Tories have had a majority in the House of Lords unelected for many, many, many decades. So a new government which is Labour, tries to redress that. That's kind of politics as usual.
You think so, but when you're saying that you kind of want to get rid of hereditary peers, which is the plan, but then you are now filling it with people who fit your own, rhetoric and your own point of view, that's not really... It's more to do with the fact that you are wanting to get rid of these people and then you're going to put other people in, your own cronies in. It just doesn't...
I think that's a bit of a cul-de-sac. I mean, every party appoints peers which are of their own political colour. The Tories have appointed their own supporters. The Lib Dems have appointed a couple of peers. So, parties appointing people who are sympathetic to their values to the House of Lords has been going on for centuries.
But we played the clip of what Keir Starmer was saying, and again, he's coming and doing something completely opposite.
No, I don't accept that.
It's
still Labour policy to change how the House of Lords work, and I think there's a fantastic case for getting rid of it in its current form. Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister, did a report. I think he demanded an assembly of the nations and the regions, i.e. something that was representative and had a bit of independent expertise, but wasn't reliant on the power of patronage, which is what we've got across all the main parties at the moment, powers of patronage.
If you're changing the way something which is a democratic thing operates, then if you want to do that, in my view, you should have some sort of referendum to ask the people of this country whether they want you to change it in that way, because that will then change the face of how we operate in terms of law, how laws get passed and all that, which is quite a big deal for one party to go in and do.
Well, you said let's potentially have a referendum on changing a democratic thing, but the House of Lords is not a democratic thing. That's the whole point. It's not democratic.
But it's about the order of democracy, how our democracy operates. And the House of Lords is one of those elements that works within our democracy. So if you're changing how that democracy operates as a democracy, then you need to make a democratic vote. That's my point. Not that the House of Lords...
It's in the Labour manifesto.
I'm quite happy for the House of... Well, they did things that aren't in the Labour manifesto, but that's irrelevant. I think if you are affecting something in terms of how a democratic thing operates, which are the Houses of Parliament and the House of Lords, they are how our democracy operates. You cannot just simply go and just change it all in your favour like that.
Well, they're not. I mean, Labour said before the general election, we want to abolish the House of Lords in its current form.
Exactly.
The public said, yes, please, voted Labour in, and it's still Labour policy.
No, I don't think the public said yes, please, and voted Labour in. You know and I know that they were, at the time, we thought the lesser of all the evils that were available in our first part, in our kind of electoral system. Unfortunately, only 30% of the population went out to vote. So in our democratic system, that is the one we operate within. But I think that when they are there, if they're going to plan to change something that is part of the actual democratic workings of this country, the people of this country should have an absolute say about that one specific issue, because you can put lots of things in, 90% of the things people could agree with, but there'll be some things in there they don't. And I think it's important when that one thing is something that affects the actual democracy of this country, that it is out to the public to also...
Well, often people poo-poo referenda saying that's why I elected government. My opposition is slightly different, which is I think people don't care. I've been a parliamentary candidate twice for Labour. The House of Lords has never, ever come up on all the doors I've knocked on. People just don't care enough.
That's not the point. That's not the point whether it's come up on the doors or not. It doesn't mean people don't care. It just means that right now people are thinking of other things. But if you are going to change something like that and you put that to the forefront, then people will care.
Well, last time we had a referendum on a democratic procedure, i.e. the voting system in the Cameron-Clegg coalition years, the turnout was very low. So again, that tells me people don't really care.
Well, maybe then they didn't, but you have to admit that the political landscape has changed and people are way more engaged in politics. I mean, you can see...
Turnout's declining.
No, well, turnout's declining probably because the options that we're given are so bad that it's just not even worth it because they're all so bad.
How can be people more engaged if turnout's declining? I always vote, but I'm perhaps increasingly anomalous. Sadly, there is disengagement, and that's shown by the fact general election turnout is declining.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree there, but I just think that that's because the options that we had this time were so poor that it was just almost a non... I mean, I have to... In my own way of voting, I was like, ugh. And I knew that the one that I'd probably vote for wouldn't do well simply for the way our electoral system works.
I think people are tired. Most of the country are poorer. They've lost faith in politics. And to be fair, that's across the parties. It would be juvenile for me to say, oh, it's all the wicked Tories. People are losing faith in Westminster politics full stop. And that's a really sad thing. And that's due to distance and money and living standards and massive decline in public services. And we can probably devote a whole another hour to talking about why that's the case.
OK, well, finally, because we're going to talk about this, do you think Nigel Farage will do better with the economy than Rachel Reeves?
No, I don't think so, because I think Nigel Farage is deeply ideological, and whatever you feel about Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, they are very pragmatic and they're quite sensible. I think we'd be in the era of,
Sensible.
Yeah.
Sensible.
And I think Nigel Farage is very ideological.
Biting the hand that feeds. Getting rid of winter fuel allowance.
Well, the deficit's £83 billion. No one who criticises the winter fuel cuts has ever come up with an alternative.
Well, just change it, that's all. Maybe
that's spending money that doesn't exist.
Raise the threshold. Yes, but you're encouraging them to go there, encouraging them to go for pension credit, which would actually, if everyone did it, would cost them more anyway, so I don't know.
Well, we don't know that, and to be a boring economist, you need to factor in things like behavioural change, but I don't want to send your viewers to sleep.
No, please don't.
Any more than I have already.